All right, I'll turn it over to the committee chair, Bertrell Ross. Bertrell.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our third and final committee on rulemaking committee meeting on individual guidance. I'll start by giving the standard protocol, and then we'll get started from there. So let me switch over to the right screen. All right, so please note that only ACUS members, including government members, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels, whether or not on the committee, and their designated alternates have full speaking privileges. To avoid background noise, though, I'd ask that you keep your microphone on mute and either use Zoom's hand raise feature or add a comment in the chat feature if you'd like to speak. I'll then call on you and you can unmute yourself. Please then remute yourself when you're done. I also ask that ACUS members and their designated alternates use the webcam to facilitate conversation. With respect to attendees other than ACUS members and alternates, participation requires the unanimous consent of the committee members. Time permitting, I'll consider calling on such attendees at appropriate points, and will presume that committee members consent absent their raising an objection. If any such participant would like to speak, please so indicate in the chat feature or by using Zoom's hand raise feature, and wait to speak until I call on you. You can then unmute yourself, and please remute yourself when you're done speaking. For all participants, please use the chat features only to indicate that you'd like to speak, or for committee members and their alternates to vote when asked. Please do not hold any sidebar discussions or put substantive comments in the chat features. Only members of the Committee on Rulemaking, including government members and their designated alternates, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels have a vote. Please do not vote unless you're a member of the committee. We have a list of committee members in case you're unsure. So I'm going to turn off my dryer right quick because it's a bit loud in the background, and then we'll get started.
And I'll start sharing my screen for the recommendation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ben. So we've made some adjustments and revisions to the recommendation document since our last meeting in response to the feedback that we received from all of you during that meeting. So we'll walk through the individual guidance. I think we'll start, as we often do, with the recommendations and walk through the recommendations, and then we'll come back to the preamble at the end to close it out. We'll focus, we'll go through the recommendations one by one, but we'll do so rather quickly based on the fact that we've read through these recommendations a couple times, had conversations and made adjustments. We'll spend a little bit more time on those recommendations for which changes have been made or there have been additions made to the recommendation document, if that's okay with everyone, okay? So I'll do as usual, I'll go one by one, give you a moment to read, and then we'll move on if there is no feedback or comments, and we'll have a discussion if there is, okay? Are there any questions before we move forward? Okay, great. Okay, so let's start with recommendation 1 and give you a chance to read, and then I'll ask for comments and feedback after that. So are there any comments or feedback on recommendation 1? Okay, we'll move forward to recommendation number 2. Any comments or feedback on recommendation 2? We'll try to get as much as, I guess we could get all of recommendation 3 on there. So we'll read through recommendation 3, give you a little longer to read through it, and then ask for comments and feedback. Yes, Jeffrey, is this with respect to recommendation 2 or 3?
3.
Okay, just give folks a little bit more time to read, and then we'll come back to Jeffrey for his comments. Okay, so I'll turn it over to you, Jeff.
Okay, purely stylistic, no substantive issues. I just thought we might give a little consideration to the order of these factors.
Okay.
And it seems to me that the last one, G, should probably be the first one. And then my suggestion would be to go G, C, D, A, B, E, F. So the reason for that is I think, the constitutional, statutory, and other authorities is probably goes without saying almost, but we probably need to put that first.
Okay.
And then I think the formality and then the accuracy of the information are second and third importance. And then after that, I would move A and B to the certainty of the relevant facts and changes in facts, and then E and F at the end. So it's, not a big deal, but just thought we might consider it. Maybe.
Okay. So
Yeah,
just
Jeff, I'm not sure I got the order right. So you want to just maybe repeat the order for me real quick?
G, C, D, A, B, E, F.
A, B, E, F. Okay. Okay.
And if you want to just turn it over to the committee on style, that's fine with me.
Yeah. So I don't know, folks would have put that idea, that order in their minds in terms of how that would work, and might have comments. I think that there is a lot of sense in that reordering of it, although I have to kind of look through it again. So I'll give people a chance to look through it again before asking for additional comments on that reordering. So, Kristen.
Thanks so much. If I can propose a friendly amendment, I think A and B ought to go before C and D, because it seems to me that A and B, consistent with the idea of constitutional, statutory, or other authorities being at the top, facts and law seem to me to follow on to that, whereas formality, accuracy, reliance, etc., tend to be more in the vein of Skidmore-ish type factors, contextual factors, rather than substantive ones.
Okay. So you're reordering.
So I guess that would be G, A, B.
Okay.
Then C, D, E, F.
Okay. So to retain the order, moving G up to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
I don't know if Jeff considers that a friendly amendment or not.
I don't feel, I think it's another good theory. I guess I thought that A and B have more to do with the certainty and the changes, but I thought so. I could go with that, but I think there's also reason to do it the way I suggested. So.
Okay. So I think the agreement is that G should go up top, and I guess I'll start there in terms of if there's anyone that objects with G moving to A, G being the first sub point under 3. Okay, so we'll make that change. And then the follow-up question goes to, the slight variation in order between Jeff and Kristen, whether they're people that have strong opinions or opinions, I guess they don't have to be strong, they can be weakly held too, about that ordering. And I guess I'll go back to, so Jeff could see it going both ways, and then Kristen, your preference would be for the order that you suggested, I assume.
Yeah, my preference would be for that order, but I'm not going to throw a fit over it.
Sounds good. So given that there are no strongly or weakly held opinions on that order beyond moving G up, why don't we leave it to the Committee on Style to see in terms of how it rates? I don't have a strong preference either. I could see it going both ways. And maybe there's kind of a stylistic element to it that makes it one order more logical than the other. But unless there's objections, we'll kind of defer to that committee to make that choice.
What does Shalini think?
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Jeff. That's a great point. Shalini, do you have a view on this ordering?
I was thinking about that and considering these, I don't have a strong opinion or really any preference. I think both make sense to me.
Okay.
Right, that's not very helpful, but
Yeah. Right. I haven't proven more helpful either, so we're all on the same boat right now.
Well, my main goal is to get people to think about it, so.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll definitely move G up and then give you guys like another 30 seconds to read through and then, okay, here we might have something. Ron.
Yeah, I think that maybe D should be grouped together with A and B because they all have to do with the factual base.
Okay. So that would accord with Jeff's because he has D, A, and B
Well,
together.
I was actually thinking of Kristen's, which you can do the same. I think the
Oh, you go.
formality is kind of changing the subject. So
Yeah.
I would take Kristen's basic approach, but reverse C and D.
Okay. So we have G, A, B, D, C, E, F.
Right.
Okay. Yes, Kristen.
For what it's worth, I take Ron's suggestion as a friendly amendment of my suggestion. So put me in Ron's camp.
Okay. You know, you only need one more to come along, Jeff.
I'd rather be in your camp, Kristen.
It's fine with me. I'm not gonna,
Okay, so why don't we go with Ron's suggestion, G, A, B, D, C, E, F as the reordering that the style committee will make to the recommendation 3. Thank you all. So let's move forward to recommendation number 4. Any comments or feedback on recommendation 4? And let's move forward to recommendation 5. And we'll turn to Jeff. Jeff, you're muted still.
this is more of a question. I just wonder why it says past non-compliance. Maybe I'm missing something. Why?
Because I think it's about depends for past non-compliance issue or solely with respect to effects. I guess my read of the recommendation is that it's covering
And then the other part of that I don't quite get is or issuing an order solely with prospective effect. I'm just having a little trouble understanding exactly
okay.
what's
It's-
supposed to happen here or why.
right. So your idea is like, you know, eliminating past would cover both past and current non-compliance.
I think so, but if it's just a little obscure to talk about issuing an order solely with prospective effect because we're talking about individualized guidance here, and then all of a sudden we're talking about an order. And it's
Okay.
seems like a little, since we usually think of I know we're not taking a
Yeah.
position as to whether it's rulemaking or adjudication, but
Right.
so
Issuing an individual guidance solely with prospective effects would be
more parallel anyway.
more parallel, right?
But I
Okay. Yeah, I see your point, Jeff. Bill.
I don't see any problem with it. The way I read this is that in an enforcement action where somebody has relied, but they aren't entitled to rely, that you in that enforcement order to that individual that order you might say, well, we're only going to do prospective effect. We're not going to penalize you when you relied, even though you don't have a right to rely. We'll consider only making the order with prospective effect, or the other one, reducing penalties for your past non-compliance. That is the compliant non-compliance that we are going against now. And non-compliance is you didn't do what we think you are required to do, even though you relied on our guidance. Is that clear? I mean, that's the way I read it.
Yeah.
It might be more clear if you said waiving any penalty for past, because then if we're talking about, and at the end, we're talking about issuing an order to that person, but only with prospective effect. So-
Right, and then waiving penalties for that person. I mean, those are alternatives.
Okay, but if we said waiving any penalty for past compliance, then we'd be more clear that we're talking about an individual person there.
That's fine with me, but
You've explained it to me, now I understand it, but it just seems a little unclear the way it's written now.
So Ben, could you kind of like bracket language that says any penalty versus penalties, and we could see sort of how,
any penalty singular.
any penalty is singular, right? Okay. So that's kind of a clarification. And then in response to Bill's point, do you still object to the word order or a description of order?
Well, you suggested saying an individualized guidance, but
No, it's not guidance.
No, it's not, yeah.
It's not guidance. It's this enforcement order.
yes.
It's after an adjudication.
Okay.
Right,
Issuing-
right.
Or issuing an
Order, right.
enforcement order? Um,
Okay.
Okay, that seems more clear to me. Yeah.
Okay. Kristen?
I'm going to lower my hand. It's with these changes, I think I was going to propose different changes, but I don't know that they would accomplish any more than what has been accomplished with this change.
Yeah, thanks. Peter?
Thanks. I had my hand hovering over to raise it as folks were talking about the word order, and I was just struggling too. Is it possible that we're calling it an order, would it ever be in some other form? A letter or something? The order really is formulaic, and it sounds like we're really talking about just enforcement actions. Is this guidance? Would this capture other situations where an agency might issue, again, a letter? I'm okay if we add enforcement order, because then we're really saying this is the situation we're talking about, an enforcement action. I just wasn't sure. And again, I was looking down below at the ombudsman part where let's say somehow a letter comes into the agency. It's not, for example, going to an ALJ, it's going to a different area and could be a different document. But if we're comfortable saying, no, we're really only talking about enforcement actions, I'm fine with this. Otherwise, I would say we delete the word order.
You could say taking enforcement action.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense to me.
Okay.
Thanks.
So proposed modification is taking an enforcement action solely with prospective effect. Okay. Long.
No, I've actually seen this before, and it's not in order. Somebody comes in for Internal Revenue Service. Somebody asks for a private letter ruling. They're not required to follow it. I mean, they're required to attach it to the return so they can see that what they've done is different from what the national office thinks is the correct application of the law. So they do follow it. And the national office realized they made a mistake in the application of law, changed their position, and that letter's revoked. This is exactly what happens. There's no penalties, and Section 7805B allows the IRS to apply whatever the new rule is prospectively so that they're grandfathered. So it's not an order, I don't think.
Right.
So I've seen it, and I think this change makes sense.
Okay. So taking enforcement action solely with prospective effects. one change or any, does anybody have, Lon, you have another hand up?
No, no.
Okay, sorry.
I just say that, notice that it starts by saying such as, Y. In other words, this isn't the total possibility. This is an example of what the first part of the sentence is.
Right. Now, even though it includes such as, are you okay with this amended language, Bill, or do you find it
I think it's fine.
okay? Any other thoughts on the changes to recommendation 5? Yes, Ron.
At the very end, I think maybe with solely prospective effect would be better than the way it reads now.
Okay. Oh, yeah, with solar. Okay. I'll take out the other with. Okay. Thank you, Ron. Okay. Are there any objections to the changes made to recommendation 5? Okay, we'll move forward to recommendation 6. This is a new recommendation, so we'll give you a little bit of time. And the changes that were made are in the comment box on the right.
I will have a suggestion about this one.
Okay. We'll come to you, David, in 20 seconds. And excuse me, the language on the right is from the actual report that Shalini wrote. So we'll start with David and we'll come to Jeff.
It strikes me as the present draft, while welcome, is more limited than it needs to be, or I think should be. So I did a search for ombuds in the rest of the report, and of course was disappointed that what I found was as slim as it is. But in the discussion of the Taxpayer Assistance Service, it said there's a sentence in the report that says this is an example of an agency offering assistance, although not necessarily legal advice, through an ombudsperson. So my suggestion is to insert a phrase in the current text for 6 before to resolve issues, so that it would read, if you like my suggestion, agencies should provide opportunities for members of the public to seek assistance from existing ombuds offices as a supplement to individual guidance or to resolve issues and so forth. So I'm suggesting inserting before to resolve issues, inserting the words as a supplement to individual guidance or.
Okay, great. Thank you, David.
You might want to break off the end of this into a second sentence.
Right. Related to or resolve issue related, and then period. We could put period after that second individual guidance. And then maybe agencies should involve such ombuds office, something like that. Okay, so Jeff.
Yeah, this is another, just a style thing. So I think we can shorten it by starting off by saying agencies with ombuds offices
Okay.
should provide so on and so forth from, should seek assistance from such offices. And then you don't need the last ombuds either, I don't think.
Such offices, okay.
Oops. Such offices.
Mhm.
And then I think you can delete ombuds on line 90 also.
Okay. Should it also involve such,
89, the end of 89. I don't think you need,
so agency should also involve such offices instead of such ombuds offices?
yeah.
And
No,
give me the last thing, Jeff, sorry.
just take out ombuds at the very end of the line.
line 89.
89.
Oh, got it. Sorry, I was trying to do brackets, but then I realized it was getting more confusing, so I just undid that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
One of the reasons I do this is not all agencies have ombuds offices, and we don't have to say existing.
Right. Okay. So we have the amended language to 6. And yes, I agree with that addition of also been in that second sentence. Okay. Any comments, suggestions, objections to the changes made? Yes, Lon.
I'm not sure what the first sentence applies to. Is this during the process of obtaining individualized guidance, or is it somehow afterward?
So looking to Shalini, let me just kind of turn to Shalini in terms of her research and to the extent that she had engaged with agency officials on their use of ombuds offices.
Sure. Yeah, I came up with a couple of agencies where it looked like people were seeking advice and from ombuds offices. I will say a lot of times it was not really legal advice. It wasn't sort of how would the agency view, prospective transaction or something like that. It was sort of how do we solve this problem, that we have. And so it seemed relevant, but I don't think it's sort of the ombuds offices are not really the main providers of the kinds of guidance that we're talking about in this report. But so in terms of supplementing, I think advice or guidance in addition to kind of legal advice, I think is sort of the role of the ombuds offices, and so I think it could properly be seen as a supplement.
Thank you, Shalini.
Thank you.
Peter.
I just wanted to echo that and agree 100%. I was looking at DOL. We have an ombuds office for a limited program, and clearly they're not lawyers. It's more general guidance. So yeah, I just want to reiterate, I think that makes a lot of sense from a practical viewpoint. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Peter. Okay. Any comments, any other comments, feedback on 6? Okay, so we'll need to move to the next section on individual guidance procedures, starting with recommendation 7, which goes through, we'll go through A through E here. And we made a change based on a discussion in our second meeting that, the Committee on Styles made some modifications, but I think kept the same purpose or same meaning of the sentence. So you can read in the comment box with the change that was made and offer any feedback on that basis too. Yeah, that's great. Okay, yeah, we can get all of 7 in here potentially. Is there a way we can see that full second comment box on the side, or is that the full comment box? Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, so are there any comments or feedback on 7? I assume, Ben, we have a hanging F? Is that gonna be?
Yeah, that's just an artifact of the track changes. If it
Okay,
is,
got it.
it looks normal when it's
Okay,
accepted.
sounds good. Yes, Jeff.
I think I may have raised this before, but K doesn't strike me as procedural. So,
Yeah, we had a discussion about
Yeah,
this
I guess,
earlier.
I guess I still have that view.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it begins by saying the agency should, well, it's the very beginning of this section. Procedures. Procedures should describe.
Right.
Um,
So I think it's, yeah, I mean, I think the, yeah. So the, so what Ben has moved us up to is 3, which kind of focuses on developing the policies surrounding reliance. And what the 7K is trying to do is just, you know, provide that policy, or asking the agency to make that policy available.
so I guess, I don't know, it's just a question of placement. Did you want to leave it as a procedure, or do you want to move it up to 3 as a final paragraph, final sentence of 3?
Got it.
But
So let's
again,
look to, yeah, let's look to the preamble of 7 again, just kind of see where people stand. So it's kind of like, yeah, the key points that were made last, because there are concerns that were raised similar to yours, Jeff. I think the key points that were made last time were that, you know, this 7 is about making these policies available to the public, whereas 3 is describing the policies. So if we put it all under 3, it wouldn't be clear that the agencies, I guess the first sentence is what is, yeah, the first and the second sentence are doing 2 different things in 7. I think a key point is the procedure should describe, right, like you're saying, Ben. Yeah, there is a, it is awkward, to say the least.
so you could put this thought that's now in K
Mhm.
at the end of 3.
Okay,
If you go back up to 3 for a second,
okay,
and then just say, either another sentence after G, or or a sentence that says something like, well,
yeah.
yeah, it can be squeezed in there somehow, but
Okay. So, Ben, do you mind just kind of just not moving, but copying that language of 7K and putting it to 3H to see how it fits within?
well, it wouldn't be a factor, so you'd have to have just a separate sentence there. It would be just just a regular sentence following.
Got it.
And then you would say,
But G would go into be the first, would now be A.
yeah, we're switching that order, yeah, but
Yeah, so would you still want that sentence to be in that first factor?
no, I would just make it a separate sentence after the factors were listed,
I see.
and then say, the agency's policies should be you could say should be published in accordance with paragraph 7, I suppose. Just leave it, you could leave it at that.
So it would still have that second sentence, wouldn't it? Because it'd be agency policies with respect to what?
These policies. Because we're talking about all the policies that are in 3A through G now. So we just move that sentence over to the left, so it appears to be a regular sentence.
Okay,
You know, don't indent it, in other words.
right.
And then just say these policies should be published in accordance with paragraph 7.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay, so we will remove the, what do they call it? The indenture on that
Indentation.
sentence.
Yeah,
So it's like,
well, not quite that far.
all right.
Yeah. Something like that. And then you wouldn't need K. But again, other people might think that's
Yeah.
too cumbersome, but to me, it's.
We also have, let me see. Yeah. I guess we'll get to the centralized collection of published materials, new recommendation 14 later. I don't know if it would quite fit there. Still feels a bit awkward, but I see your point, Jeff. What do others think? And we could come back to yeah, I guess we'll we see the proposal here is to have the sentence with respect to publication. And let's kind of go back to 7, I guess K, as it's certainly set up. I guess it would be helpful. Is there any way we could put K up to right below the 7 preamble so that we could see it, together and see if that, how it fits here? Because I think because it's so far down, it's kind of hard to.
Sorry, Bertrand, did you want to have it be the new paragraph A?
Just for now,
7.
just
Okay,
for
gotcha.
visibility purposes, so we can see how it kind of fits.
Yeah, the one thing that's missing now, if you do it my way here, is the idea that it should also indicate when it is appropriate for a requester or other individual to rely on it. You'd have to put that in 3, in that sentence in 3 also.
Right. Okay. Ron.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of this discussion, and could you just remind me, and anyone else who was not paying sufficient attention at the time, what the objection to K as presented in the written draft was?
Yeah. I guess Jeff, you could say
It was my objection, Ron. I was just saying that it didn't seem procedural to me. It didn't seem to belong in a list of procedures. Because the 7 begins,
Yeah,
yeah. So I thought it should, since 3 is all about the development of these policies, we should indicate that it should be published right there in number 3.
yeah, I'm not so sure that it has to be a procedure in order to fit logically within 7. There have to be procedures for requesting and issuing, et cetera. The procedure should describe A through G, and why not also describe the substance of K? It doesn't say it is a procedure, it says the procedures they do issue should address A through K. So I think maybe the way it was in the written draft is better than the alternatives under discussion, because we are talking about publication. And so 3 is not about publication unless we cram it in there.
Bill.
I'm with Ron. on this.
Lon.
Just, can you hear me? Am I?
Yes. Gary.
Okay. when you look at the flush language at the beginning of 7, the second sentence is also not procedural, it's about publishing. So maybe, I don't know if, I don't want to throw a wrench in this, but another section talking about not just making the individual guidance publicly available, but making the procedures publicly available. That would be the second sentence in the flush language, and then K, wouldn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
Again, I think
I think I know better than to go against both Ron and Bill, so I think I'm gonna withdraw my suggestion.
Okay. So Ben, why don't we sort of delete under 3? Yeah, move that to K, back to K. I guess it's already there. And then, yeah, remove that.
Yes, I just undid everything.
Yeah,
We're back
great.
at K.
Yeah, that's even a lot easier. Any other comments or suggestions with respect to 7? So let's move forward to 8. Any comments or feedback on 8? Let's move forward to 9. Any comments on 9? We'll move to the next section on public availability of individualized guidance, recommendation 10. Any comments on 10? Okay, we'll move forward to recommendation 11. Any comments on recommendation 11? Okay, we'll move to recommendation 12. Any comments on recommendation 12? Okay, move forward to recommendation 13.
Hey, Ross, this is Peter. I'm moving to select. I just had one on the one before 12.
Yes, okay, let's come back to 11.
Yeah, I'm assuming, do we make any reference to FOIA when we're talking about redaction? When I was looking at this, I'm thinking agencies are going to look at, do we have to, whether we're providing it, the guidance to another party or in general, they probably would look to FOIA. So I wasn't sure here if we want to make a general reference to redacting consistent with FOIA or other relevant laws, something like that.
Okay.
It takes care of us trying to come up with, when we talk about sensitive, otherwise protected, again, my thought automatically went to FOIA. So I don't know how others feel about including a reference to that specific statute.
Got it.
Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Thoughts on Peter's comment or other comments that with respect to 11 through 13, Kristen?
Sorry, I was struggling to unmute. My comment is with respect to 13. So are you ready to move on to 13?
Yeah, and we'll keep the FOIA reference suggestion on how
Okay.
to stew over it, but let's go with Kristen with 13.
So this is a little bit of a style point. Perhaps, I was a little bit confused on 13 by sort of the last little bit where it talks about how the guidance should indicate on the face of the document that it has been modified or rescinded and provide access to any explanation for the modification or rescission or successor guidance. My initial thought was that last or should be an of, but then I decided maybe that's not right, that it is or, but maybe it should be or for successor guidance. There's like a grammatical discontinuity there that is confusing me in terms of exactly what it's saying.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I think it's meant to be or an additional thing that a person could provide access to. But I see your point with respect to the grammatical.
So yeah, maybe it should be to provide access to successor or to
See.
success.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly how to.
Right.
Maybe it should be and provide access to successor guidance and to any explanation for the modification or rescission.
Yeah, that's good. I like that better. Okay.
I don't know if that captures it, but I'll let others weigh in.
Yeah. Others as well. Jeff and then Ron.
Isn't Jeff next?
Yeah, Jeff. Yeah.
I'm just trying to unmute. This is really trivial, but we use the term requestor, TOR. And so I just looked it up and it says that's the British version of requestor. And then I checked the 2014 recommendation we used on FOIA, and we used requestor with the ER. So just check the past recommendations and see.
Okay.
Okay.
No Anglophiles allowed here, people.
Right. Got it. Ron.
I'm a little confused here. Does this paragraph refer to the prior guidance or the new guidance? Because it seems as though it's talking about the new one, but in that case, you wouldn't be talking about a successor, you'd be talking about a predecessor. But maybe I just don't understand what the rest is. The document, I would suppose, is the new one. Now, what you mean is, no, the new one is just published. Now we're going to put some material on the old one to like a pocket part saying, oh, it's been replaced. But I thought we were talking about the new one, in which case you wouldn't talk about the successor because this is the successor.
Right. This is the successor. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Bill.
I think by moving the successor guidance to where you did, that makes it strange. But the idea was you should provide access to the explanation for the change you're making.
Yeah.
And the change could be modification, could be rescission, it could be new guidance, all right? But it should read access to any explanation for, and then that list or.
Right.
I think it was correct as originally drafted.
But do we even need a reference to successor guidance, since that's the thing that should be on the website?
It's
the current guidance that's already been modified.
You should provide explanation to what you've done.
Exactly. Absolutely. But would it be redundant to make reference to successor guidance, since successor guidance is the thing that's already on the website, presumably, or we're asking to have on the website?
It should indicate on the face of the document that it is modified or rescinded and provide an explanation.
Yeah, I agree. So and that would be, would be to eliminate the language on successor guidance in this paragraph.
Well, I'd leave it in because it might be, rather than a modification, it might be a different In other words, modification, rescission, or successor guidance. Those are the three possible ways things might be different.
Right. But I guess my question would be, the first sentence, agency should keep individualized guidance on their website current. And so that would presumably be the modified guidance, or if it's rescinded, it wouldn't be a guidance on there at all. And so having access to the successor guidance would be taken care of by that first sentence that says that the individual guidance on the website should be current.
I think what the second sentence does is it says that you should, when you don't just take off the old one or just put a new one, you explain why you've changed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree all that. The second sentence is fine. I'm just wondering if we need to make reference to successor guidance, since that's the only point I'm making. But if folks, if I'm missing something here, then yeah, just ignore my comment, please. Jerry or Bill.
I just say, I mean, you should move any explanation to precede successor guidance. Because it's the explanation we're talking about. It's not the guidance itself we're talking about. We've already said that in the first sentence.
Right. And so.
And provide access to any explanation.
Okay. So provide access. So we'll move the successor guidance for now. So provide access on, yeah, there you go,
Provide access.
Any explanation for the modification or rescission. And then what would come after rescission would be or successor guidance, or what would you put there?
That's what I would put there, or successor guidance.
Okay.
I might note that this is the way it was originally.
Yes, it is.
So it's non-responsive to Kristen's original concern.
No, it's not.
I would be, to capture what Bill's saying, I understand now better what Bill is saying. I would propose simply putting the word "for" before successor guidance. So it would be provide access to any explanation for the modification or rescission.
I see.
Or grammatically, it would be, and provide access to any explanation for successor guidance.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that too. I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, that makes more sense to me as well. Jeremy.
Yeah, if you're fine with that, then I can let this be. But I'm looking at past recommendations that this was modeled on, mostly inoperative guidance and public availability of agency guidance. You could just say it should, on the face of the document, indicate that it has been modified or rescinded and include a link to any successor guidance. That's the basic idea.
Yeah. But I thought it was like the second sentence was also doing an explanation
Right.
for the successor guidance as in addition to.
Yeah, sorry, I left that out. I think you'd say it should, on the face of the document, indicate that it's been modified, provide access to any explanation for the modification, and include a link to any successor guidance.
Well, you wouldn't have a link to the guidance, successor guidance. The successor guidance would be there.
Right, but it would be hosted as a separate file on the website, and you would provide a link to the successor guidance. I mean, that's taken from 2 earlier recommendations, where we specifically say include a link to any successor guidance documents on the face of the document.
Yeah.
That's on the face of the old document.
Correct.
The new document.
Correct.
And
On the old document, I see.
You could say on the face of the rescinded individual or modified or rescinded individual guidance.
I see.
Put it
Okay,
in there.
got it.
That's the idea.
Got it. Okay. I'm a little slow this morning. Kristen.
Sorry, I just forgot to put my hand down from before.
Oh, no worries. Ron.
Well, I'm still a little puzzled about whether this refers to the old one or the new one. But what I was thinking, on the assumption it refers to the new one, I think you could say, should indicate on the face of the document that it's been modified or rescinded and provide an explanation for the modification or rescission, which may include the text of the prior guidance. Now, if you want also to have something on the archived version of the old version saying this has been updated, see, link to that would be a separate point.
Yeah, as drafted, consistent with public availability of inoperative agency guidance documents. This was meant to refer to the archived version of the old document, saying that clearly indicate that this is no longer operative instead of just removing it, and provide access to whatever the current document is to make sure that people are not relying on old guidance.
Yeah, that'd be a little wordier. It may be something for the committee on style, but I think the policy question for the committee is,
Right.
Is it desired that we want to cover the new one, the old one, or both? And I think what Jeremy's suggesting is it should speak to both, but probably in language we can't draft on the fly.
Right. I mean, one thought it should indicate on the face of the
I
modified.
agree. I agree. I think we ought to give it to the style people to
Right.
pick up what we said before, right? Just take Jeremy's point well and say, yeah, let's substitute the language we've used in a previous recommendation and use it here.
Okay. Sounds good.
And the preamble might link to that prior source.
All right. Jeff.
Might.
Right.
Okay, I'm not sure we need provide access to, provide any explanation.
Right, I agree with that.
So the proposal is to delete access to on line 154.
Shouldn't we just leave it to the style people to do the whole paragraph all over again?
Yeah, it
To
might just-
copy what we've said in a previous recommendation and not try to worry about wordsmithing this year?
Right. Yeah, so let's kind of, yeah, I agree with that, Bill, since all of this could potentially be changed. But yeah, we'll take it to committee on style, make the change in accordance with prior recommendations that have made similar suggestions. Lon.
I just want to make sure I understand what we're doing. It seems to me that we're saying we have two documents here, the original and then the one that say that modifies it. On the original one, we want the agencies to put a stamp saying this has been modified, see document so-and-so. And then in the later document, provide the explanation of why it's been modified. Is that correct?
As I understand it, we have the agencies in the first sentence keeping the individual guidance, the current individual guidance on the website. And then with respect to the older guidance, the prior guidance, we're saying that on the face of the document, it should indicate if it has been modified or rescinded. And in that document, provide explanation for the modification or rescission. And the
When
link
you
to
say-
the successor guidance.
When you say in that document,
In
we
the
have
old-
document, we have
yeah.
old document, we have new document.
Right, it's old document.
So old document, if they want the agency to go back, put a stamp, assuming it's paper, put a stamp on it saying this has been modified. See
Right.
document so-and-so, and a new document, and then a new document, we provide the explanation. That's what we want them to do, correct?
As
So
I
both
read it-
documents are still
as-
out
as-
there. The old one has a stamp
Yeah,
on it.
yeah, as I read it, it's not that clear to me that what you're suggesting is what this says, although your approach probably might be the better one. As I understand it,
Well,
I
just-
could be wrong, that the old document has to indicate a stamp that's modified or rescinded, and on the old document, any explanation for the modification or rescission, and on the old document, a link to the successor guidance.
But the successor guidance would have the explanation too, correct?
No, I don't.
That's what it's doing. It's,
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
if you're modifying or you're rescinding, your new document would say that's what we're doing and here's why.
That's
I
why
would
we
think.
put provide access to, which may not be the most artful way of saying it, but at least leaving open the option that it may not necessarily need to be on the document if, say, the successor document explains why it's been modified or rescinded. Just provide access to it, which might just be a link to wherever the explanation is.
Right.
That was at least the idea, provide access to.
Right. So it's not about the document itself, it's just access somewhere to the explanation.
But,
Got it.
but then don't you have to change, it should indicate on the document has to refer back to the original document, right?
Yeah, it would have to say that, and the agency would have to provide access to any explanation, rather than to separate the document from what we're asking the agency to do, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, so that's, I'm wondering if it should indicate on the face of the document that it has been modified. What is that? That's referring to the old document, right? It's been modified. So you have to
Right.
stamp something on that and then
Yes.
put a link to some new document wherever the explanation is, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And,
I know
and
that that's impossible. I just want to make sure that's the process.
yeah. As I understand the process, and perhaps what I think of as a logical process, it would be the old document would say it's been modified or rescinded. And then the agency would provide access to any explanation for the modification or rescission, or a link to any successor guidance.
Right.
That's how I would think of it. And maybe changing the words.
What would the new guidance say?
Well, with the new guidance, what?
Would it have an explanation there?
Well, we're not recommending that here. Presumably it should, and maybe we need to make modifications to 13 to indicate that it should.
I wonder if Jeremy could post
Yeah.
the language that he's suggesting from the prior recommendation, so we could actually see that language and see if it takes care of everybody's problems.
It's slightly cobbled together from two different recommendations, but I can put both of those recommendations in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. I think we had Courtney and then Ron, and we'll have the recommendation language in the chat.
This is maybe just from my experience at how various agencies have done individualized guidance, but this concept of modifying individualized guidance doesn't make sense to me from an agency perspective. I mean, it definitely makes, sense when we're talking about general guidance, but how do you modify a letter to an individual person? It just doesn't make sense to me, the concept.
Yeah. Shalini, did you have experience with agencies modifying individual guidance, or discussions with agency officials on modification of individual guidance?
Yes, so I think there's some instances where, something actually that Lon said, I think speaks to this, that maybe the agency is going to change course on how the law applies to a certain situation. And so it may not affect the original requester because, they got their letter and maybe some time has passed and the agency's making a change. But there could be instances where the agency has rethought a question and, either there's a mistake or they want to make a change. So I think we saw a little bit of that.
But wouldn't that be general guidance, not individualized guidance?
So the rethinking would be in the setting, in the context of a letter or an opinion, that was sort of issued to an individual. So that's the kind of situation I think that's contemplated here.
So let's go with Lon, and for purposes of reading, I think if this is correct, Jeremy, we're looking at recommendation 8E on this past recommendation. Would that be correct, Jeremy? As a analogous recommendation to the one we're making here.
Yes, correct.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so 8E. Lon, and then Ron.
I'll just say, Shalini was absolutely correct. I've had to do this before. That's not frequent. You issue a letter ruling, and a year, maybe 2 years later, you realize that you made a mistake in it of some sort, and you've had to change your position. You revoke the old letter, you issue a new letter, and then you grant the individual relief in the past to the extent that they justifiably relied on. So it's exactly as the way, at least the way I did it was exactly the way Shalini described.
Thanks,
And it's not generalized guidance.
Ron.
Again, I think this is going to have to go to the Committee on Style, but I'm just going to make a general point, which is I don't see why you need any explanation attached to the old guidance. You just say, it's been superseded, it's obsolete. It's the explanation should go with the new one saying, this is different from what we said a year ago. Here's why we changed it. That's what's of current interest. I don't think that if it's simply is no longer in effect, that you need to say more than that it's no longer in effect.
And so in light of that comment and the other comments that are made about the current recommendation 14 or 13, I don't have that document up. Does the committee think that 8E on this document that Jeremy sent us would capture what we want in the recommendation here for individual guidance? And this would have specific reference to individual guidance rather than guidance documents. And the one thing I noticed is omitting discussion of any explanation, which is consistent with what Ron's point was. And the question is whether the committee agrees with that modification, for lack of a better term. Lon, and then Bill.
I think
I have a question for Ron, which is, I agree that the old document should say it's been rescinded and doesn't have to provide an explanation there why. But I think it would be worthwhile and valuable to provide a link to the new from the old, right? So that presumably the new would include an explanation for why it was doing what it was doing. But I think it's important that there's a link between the rescission and the new one.
Okay.
That was what I intended, though.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Lon?
Yeah, I agree with what they're saying. Shouldn't it say in line 153, and the agency should provide any explanation and a link? Not the old document should necessarily. However, they do it so that the documents are linked both ways.
Right. So I think the committee as style has enough information to make the adjustments. I think we'll borrow generously from 8E and the public availability of agency guidance documents recommendation from 2019, but make the additional changes responsive to the suggestions of Lon, Ron, and Bill. Are there any other suggestions with respect to this recommendation?
Does Shalini have her hand up?
Yeah, Shalini, sorry.
Yeah, actually, it's not to change the wording of the recommendation, but I just wanted to speak to I think it was Courtney's question. So I think there are instances too where agencies have very publicly rescinded opinion letters. So I know Department of Labor, there's some news stories out there with a change in administration, they sort of rescind a whole bunch of letters and then maybe they're reissued later. So I think that's the type of situation that is covered by this recommendation.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry, I can't quite get my screen back working. Okay. Sorry, I can't quite see the document anymore. 1 second. Having technical difficulties. I clicked on to Jeremy's link, but now I can't get back to the regular document. Does anybody have advice on how to get to the screen? I can see all your beautiful faces, but not the actual document.
Yeah, can everybody else still see the shared document?
This is
Right.
just my idiocy.
It's multiple Zoom windows. It's challenging sometimes.
Yeah, and it's also me. Oh, there we go. Wow. Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on. So we'll make those changes to 13. Oh, I just want to go back to don't want to miss out on Peter's point with respect to reference to FOIA in 12. What does the committee think about making those references a reference to FOIA?
This is Peter. I was just gonna add, I don't know if we want to add in there with the line says otherwise protect from disclosure, redact. You could almost say something, get rid of sort of the summary and just say consistent with FOIA or other relevant privacy and information laws.
Okay, so it would be just kind of see where that fits. Agencies should redact any information that is sensitive or otherwise protected from disclosure, consistent with FOIA at that point.
I think so.
Okay. So that would be the proposed change.
I think you could get rid
Oh, sorry.
of and redact identifying details to the extent required. And again,
Okay.
I defer to this. I think we could just make it a lot less wordy than if we're just referencing FOIA.
Got it. So delete the,
And again, if there are other laws folks want to say or consist with FOIA or other relevant information laws.
okay, so consistent with FOIA or other information laws, related information laws. Or information laws, I don't know.
Relevant.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Bill,
He said other relevant.
other relevant information laws, thank you. Any comments or objections to this change? And then we'll make the changes to 13. So 14 is a new recommendation in response to the discussion that we had at committee meeting 2. Any comments or suggestions on 14? Okay, and finally, recommendation 15 under relationship to other agency processes. Any comments on recommendation 15? Okay, so let's just move back to the preamble then and start paragraph by paragraph. There's a change to the first paragraph, but I'll give you guys a chance to read it. The comments on that change are in the right margin. Any comments or feedback on paragraph 1 of the preamble? Okay, so let's move to paragraph 2. Any comments or feedback on paragraph 2? Okay, we'll move to paragraph 3. Yes, Kristen.
This is a very minor point, but didn't we decide that requester is ER
Yeah, I think we're gonna
Yeah,
we're
we'll
gonna
go through and make
on
those
line
changes.
24?
Yeah, we'll go through. without
yeah, we're
change.
gonna make all the changes to request start and make sure that the way we spell it comports with prior recommendations. Thanks, Krista. Jeff.
This is a little strange comment, I guess, but when I see a relatively formal manner and then it says e.g. via letter, I'm thinking it doesn't really seem that formal to me. Are there examples of even more formalized versions of individualized guidance?
Yeah. Shalini, in terms of discussions that you had with agency officials and distinctions that they drew between formal and less formal, formal and less formal ways of providing individual guidance.
Yeah, yeah, so letter, I think, is just a term used. It may not even be but like it's basically, you know, a letter written, an opinion issued to an individual person. So it's not going to take, I don't think I saw instances where there was something where it was called something other than a letter, really. But it's a fairly well-researched, thorough analysis. So I know letter makes it sound casual, but it's actually, I think, is considered on the more formal end of this sort of advice giving.
Got it. Thanks, Shalini. Jeff, did you have a response? Okay.
No.
Peter?
I appreciate that. I think though culturally, we do move more towards providing more detailed information analysis in email. I just think more and more the way agencies and the public communicate, it does occur in email. So I'm just struggling. I'm not sure if I was a member of the public, I would think email is informal, you know, more informal, if you will, than a letter. I mean, I know, I get what you're saying. It just seems weird that we're saying a letter is more formal these days than via email. I'm not sure how you change it, how you want to revise it, but it just struck me as odd given where we are today.
You know, the pace of technological change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Next month,
And,
right?
and I get exactly what you're saying. You're right. A lot of times that letter, there is that formal indicia of it's signed, you know, all of that. But I think substantively, more and more, I think it's hard to draw a strict line where there's a formal analysis in an email that goes out to somebody, particularly a member of the public.
I mean, one revision, we could take out these exemplars. I don't know if they're necessary for the preamble, but
That's a good point too.
you know, ask what other people think on that. Kristen.
So I actually think we do need to keep this in here, and I'll explain why. I mean, you know, so if we just took out the exemplars and we talk about individual guidance is issued in a relatively formal manner, I know we have a footnote that specifies that some agencies use the word guidance for more, you know, for things other than the individualized guidance that we're talking about here. But at the same time, if we take out the via letter, then to me anyway, that relatively formal manner may seem to suggest, for example, something published in the Federal Register, you know, or something like that. When we say, you know, and yet still, I mean, relatively speaking, notwithstanding the fact that agencies do an awful lot of business these days by email, if you actually get a letter on a physical letter on letterhead signed by, you know, some official in the agency, that is relatively formal when compared to an email. We're not saying that the email or the letter are in any way, shape, or form different from one another vis-a-vis this recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
We're just describing them, you know, in the sense of, you know, relatively speaking, the individualized guidance can take the form of a letter, it can take the form of an email, but it's not limited to those two.
What
So I
about-
actually really like the sentence as written and distinguishing the individualized guidance that we're talking about here from more generalized guidance.
You could say signed letter or letter signed by a high agency official or something like that.
I have no problem with via a signed letter if Shalini thinks that that captures what she's talking about.
Yeah. Shalini, I mean, I guess I'll pose another question to Shalini too. Do you think that these mark sort of, given Peter's point about the growing ambiguity about the formality of email, should we describe informal ways as perhaps orally communicated guidances, right? Those seem certainly on the informal end of the spectrum, and that's not likely to change with changes in technology. So it's just a couple of things thrown at you, Shalini.
Okay. Yeah, so I think in the report, I go into this more that formality really refers to a whole set of issues, not just kind of is it typed on letterhead and such, but kind of how high up it goes in terms of who it's reviewed by in the agency. And it's broader effect. Is it something that, you know, the agency expects a lot of people to rely on, or is it really just for this one requester? So there are all these things that may touch on formality sort of in different ways. I think here, just for the purposes of showing there's really a spectrum, there's a lot of variety. You know, I'm fine if that more is added to letter to kind of make that satisfactory to people via a letter signed by a high level agency official. You know, you could do something like that. And then your question about whether a truly informal example would be sort of over the phone. The only concern there is that's not technically part of the report. So then I'm wondering if that.
And trust me, I don't have strong
Yeah, good
feelings on
point.
this. So Kristen, if you want to keep it the way it is, that's fine. But it's funny, you know, Shalini, but I was thinking too, yeah, the more formal, if I send, you know, associate solicitor, an email out to somebody, people are like, if it comes from the acting secretary, whether it is an email or it is her signed form letter, it's interesting. I think, yeah, I don't know if we want to get into it. We're almost done here, but I think you're right. Formality, I would look at too, sort of who's it coming from. But again, this is a minor point. It's more maybe the statement of how much we use email these days. So again, Kristen, if others feel strongly, I'm fine with leaving it in there.
Lon, and then Ron, and then Bill.
I'll just mention that, first I'll agree with Kristen and Shalini about it. Private letter ruling, it has to be signed by somebody with signature authority. And they're not necessarily a high level permanent assistant branch chief. GS-14 can do that. Email is not necessarily done that way. And the reliance is different. Generally, you can't rely on a private letter ruling at all. It's statutory, but you can avoid penalties with that. You cannot avoid penalties with an email. So there is a higher level of formality with a private letter ruling than it is with an email. So I'd keep it the way it is.
Okay. Ron.
I think you could handle the points that have been made in the last couple of minutes economically by saying in the first parenthetical, e.g. via letter from a high-ranking official. And the second one, e.g. via an email from a lower-ranking staff member. Now you're capturing both the medium of communication and the rank of the person who transmits it. And that isn't comprehensive either, but it says e.g. So I think you're conveying the idea fairly concisely.
Okay.
This is Peter. I'm great with that. But again, if others want to keep it the way it was, I really, you know, just erase it, but it's not something I would lose sleep over. But I do like Ron's edit.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think what Ben's pointing out with this highlighting is that we do make reference to different positions, agency heads, senior officials, and other guidance is prepared by lower level officials in the next sentence. So I don't know if we feel like that feels a little too repetitive to add it to the parenthetical when there's reference to those different levels in the next sentence or not. Bill.
Well, I think that the first sentence that we're talking about here should be formats rather than formality. So that individualized guidance is issued in different formats. For example, letters or emails, all right, without trying to decide what level of formality that means, but it's just a different format for getting it. Then the next sentence talks about the level at which these things are done. So that's one way of distinguishing between who's doing it and how it comes out, rather than. But I could live with the original formulation. I could live with Ron's formulation, but I just thought maybe formats was what the sentence was really concerned about, rather than formality.
Kristen.
But again, I think when we talk about different formats, at least as I'm accustomed to seeing formats discussed in administrative law in general, formats ranges from notice and comment regulations all the way down to staff emails. You know, formats is sort of it's another word that captures more than I think that this document's trying to capture. So I would be inclined to keep the sentence as it was originally written. I have no objection to Ron's proposed additions, other than I do take the point that they then make the sentence after the sentence that begins on line 23 sort of redundant.
I am okay not to totally go with the way it was. I appreciate the conversation, but yeah, given where folks are on this, I'm fine keeping the way it was written. I'll just be more mindful the next time I send an email to a member of the public. Thank you, Kristen.
So we have two proposals, the original, which we just referenced via letter, via email, and then the Ron's amendment that would reference, an example from whom the email or letter or email might be received. But keep in mind in terms of how the whole paragraph reads together. So maybe I'll give you guys a moment to read the whole paragraph together and then make the decision as to which way we want to go. Okay, Ron.
So now that I did overlook the following sentence that refers specifically to different levels, so I would recede from my previous suggestion. But I think the distinction between email and letters is also confusing. So you might want to say something along the lines of agency practice varying individualized guidance may be issued in a variety of formats with differing degrees of formality. Or something like that.
Hey, Ron, could you just say it one more time? Different
May be
formats.
issued in formats with varying degrees of formality. And could be polished further. That was off the cuff. What be before issued?
Variety of different formats.
Yes, a variety of different formats.
So then we would delete the from high ranking official and from
Yes.
low.
Yes.
Okay.
No, don't delete, take it all out.
Yeah, just that one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we put some, okay,
But you don't want both.
right. Okay, so Ron, just kind of make sure your amendment is captured. So it would be that additional sentence in the blue, and then it would take out the next sentence. That starts.
Well, yeah, but now that I look at it, I think maybe the better thing to do would be to keep the prior sentence without the EGs. Because the letters and email parts distract, but Otherwise, you're just saying there, some is relatively formal, some isn't.
Right,
That may be as good as you can do.
right. So now we're taking out that sentence, the added sentence, and we're taking out also the exemplars.
Yeah, that's my third or fourth suggestion with
Okay.
subject to being replaced again.
It sounds good.
Why,
All right.
why do we need the second sentence there after we've already said varying degrees of formality?
Oh, no, so I think that Ron's new proposal is to delete that sentence now. Is that right? Or delete the sentence individual guidance. Start
Restore the previous sentence, take out the one in blue, which I suggested earlier.
Right, exactly. So let's take out the one in blue. Oh, no,
keep-
no, you had it right the first time. So Ben, we're still getting rid of that.
Right.
We're still getting EGs, getting rid of exemplars, and we're taking out the original sentence that Ron had proposed. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so that's the proposal on the table. Bill.
I'm happy with that.
Okay. Kristen, I think you're the one that wanted the exemplars.
Yeah, I don't have a vote because I'm not formally on this committee, but I continue to object to taking out the EGs because I feel like when we don't have examples there, even though the examples are only representations, they're not the only things, but I feel like as the sentence is written without examples, it leads to the possibility of confusion with things that are not, I mean, look, interpretive rules, policy statements, even notice and comment regulations in certain contexts can have very narrow, relatively individualized focus. And we're talking about truly less formal stuff than that. We're talking about letters, we're talking about emails, we're talking about those kinds of things. And so I think having the examples in there in a manner that indicates this is not the sum total of things is useful. It's also useful to specify that we're talking about things that are in writing, letter and email are things that are written, as opposed to the next sentence, which suddenly mentions oral guidance. Well, if you don't have the sentence, if you don't have some indicator of the written, then having the sentence that talks about oral guidance seems kind of out of place. And in the meantime, the sort of relatively formal manner and relatively informal ways don't actually do any kind of, there's no distinction being drawn here for, in terms of impact of this set of recommendations. We're truly just offering examples. I understand the original concern that email has so taken the place of letters that we don't want to somehow suggest that emails are somehow lesser than letters. But I really don't think that's what this sentence as originally worded does. I don't know that anybody would think that, especially given the next sentence talking about, or the two sentences later talking about reviewed and issued by agency heads or other senior officials versus staff, surely, I just can't see where people are going to get confused. I take Peter's point about the emailing, but I just don't see that sentence as confusing. And I feel like by taking out the examples, we are making it more confusing rather than less.
Hearing the entire discussion, I am fine with keeping that in there. Again, it's not something I'd say, wow, we have to. And I think Kristen really gives a good explanation. So being the one who first raised it, also realizing we've got 20 minutes left in our meeting, this is one I could say, let's move on. Perfection's the enemy of the good, particularly on this one. So I'm happy to withdraw any concerns. So I appreciate, Kristen, in seriousness, I do appreciate the discussion. So I'm fine with leaving it as.
So mindful of the time, but also wanting to recognize who wants to speak. We'll kind of go with
Yeah, I did intend to leave my hand up. I just wanted to
you
speak
did?
to Kristen's point. I
Okay,
think
yes.
we could deal with it by just saying, e.g. by a formal letter, e.g. via an informal email.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So e.g. would be a formal letter or informal email. Could be one way. We would avoid the repetitiveness. Jeff and then Jeremy.
I think I'm leaning towards taking out these examples because it's really a distinction without a difference, or difference without a distinction at this point, because what about an email that contains a PDF that has a formal letter that's signed? I mean, so unless we really elaborate in the parenthetical by saying something, some language that we used to have in there, like signed by a high level agency official, I don't think it's much of a distinction, and I think it is somewhat confusing because people will say, well, what if the letter is embedded in the email? Is that formal or informal?
I guess one of the questions is whether the distinction ultimately matters that much, but yeah.
Doesn't it?
Jeremy.
Just a suggestion. Some individualized guidance is issued in a relatively formal manner, such as a signed opinion on agency letterhead, while other guidance may be issued in a relatively informal manner, such as in the body of an email.
Yeah. Such as a signed letter on agency letterhead. And we would not do this. Do you think, is your suggestion to keep this in the parenthetical or to have this as a comma off clause?
I think you could just do it as a comma off clause.
Yeah. So there's something about EGs that kind of create a lot of controversy and consternation. So we could go that, and then while other individuals may be issued in relatively informal ways. And then can you repeat what that such as was?
Yeah, such as in the body of an email, to get to Jeff's point.
Okay.
I will make the observation that one point in favor, I'm good with such as rather than e.g. because I take that point, but one virtue of putting things in parentheticals rather than set off by commas in this sentence is that it's a long and complex sentence. And putting things in parentheticals rather than setting them off by commas makes the sentence read, at least to my eye, a little bit less complex.
Right.
Then we have another parenthetical right after it.
Yeah.
Take out the
parenthetical
if the recommendation does not address guidance provided
orally. Yeah, it could be non-parenthetical, or it could be even in a footnote. But if it's important to have in the body, we just take out the parentheses. Okay, so why don't we leave it out to the committee on style with respect to the parenthetical to include there, or not. I hear Kristen's point. I agree, it reads a little bit better with the parentheticals, but we'll see what the committee on style feels about that. And then we have a suggestion to remove that other parenthetical that follows, which I agree with as well. Jeff, do you have another point, or is that an old hand? Okay, so are there any other suggestions or objections to the changes that are made to, I think we're on paragraph 3. All right. Okay, so let's move forward to paragraph 4. Any comments or feedback on paragraph 4? Yeah, let's move to paragraph 5. And with note that we will make all the changes to requester throughout the document to make sure it comports with prior recommendations. But Jeff. I think you're still muted, Jeff.
I'm sorry, two minor things, where says strictly to limit the risk of sanction. I might say the perceived risk on 37,
All the guys.
limit the perceived risk.
Perceived risk of that. Okay, so it'd be perceived after that.
And then where it says the next sentence beginning members, some members of the public.
Okay. So some of the public. Okay,
That's it.
got it. Thanks, Jeff. Any objections or comments with respect to the changes proposed by Jeff? Any other comments or suggestions with respect to paragraph 5? So let's move forward to paragraph 6. Any comments or suggestions with respect to paragraph 6? Yes, Jeff. I think you're muted still, Jeff.
We use the phrase individualized guidance so often in this paragraph.
Yeah,
Must be some way to just say such guidance or.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's committee on style reduce the use of individual guidance here in this paragraph. Yes, particularly with the sentence that starts with line 44, it seems like such guidance could be used with respect to one reference, the second reference to individual guidance. But there's other examples there too. Any other suggestions with respect to paragraph 6? Yes, Bill.
Reluctant to raise this, but what's 40s? If you can hear me over my dog barking, it recommends that agencies not treat individualized guidance as creating binding standards. I'd make it stronger. It cautions agencies not to treat individualized guidance as creating binding standards.
Okay.
Not to treat.
Agencies not to treat. So. Okay.
I think that's consistent with the actual language of the recommendation.
Right. Should not treat. Yeah. Okay. Any comments or objections to Bill's proposed change? Any comments, suggestions with respect to any other parts of paragraph 6 or 7? 7, maybe. Okay. So let's take a look at the last paragraph. Any comments or suggestions with respect to the last paragraph? Okay. So any other lingering comments with respect to the preamble or any of the recommendations that folks want to put out there? Jeff?
Just wondering whether that heading individualized guidance generally is the best we can do there. General principle or
Generally,
just throwing that out for people
okay.
to think about.
Okay. Do folks have suggestions or objections or ideas? I guess suggestions and ideas are the same.
Initial section is dealing with policies as distinct from procedures. You know, I don't know if you want to consider individualized guidance policies.
Right. Bill.
I'm sorry to go backwards, but the next to last paragraph in the preamble, the last sentence,
Yes.
finally, it addresses circumstances which agencies use individualized guidance to support other forms of agency action. I think that refers to the very last recommendation, relationship to other agency processes.
Mhm.
And if so, I mean, that's very specific. You warrant development of general rule rather than other forms of agency action. So I wonder if we shouldn't be more specific here in which agency should use, and I don't know if it addresses circumstances or
Gonna come back to it. Okay.
and at least to say to support development of general rule rather than other forms of agency action.
Yeah, to support development of general rule. Okay.
Sorry to raise this.
Yeah, no, that's appreciate your input. Okay.
General rules,
Rules. Yeah.
take out A.
Yeah. Okay.
If I can just say, I like the suggestion of saying that heading, first heading, individual guidance policies,
Okay. So
because it comports with the next one, which is individual guidance procedures.
yes. Okay. Okay. All right. Any objections to the change suggested by Bill with respect to the last sentence in paragraph? It's the penultimate paragraph, I guess I'll say, of the preamble. And then any objections or feedback on the change to the title to the first section of the recommendations? Yes, Jeff.
One last one, the last heading, which Bill just talked about, really.
All the way at the bottom.
Relationship to other agency processes doesn't really. I mean, why don't we just say what we're use of individualized guidance in aid of rulemaking or something like that. Because what other processes are there that we're talking?
Okay. Right. Okay. Thoughts or objections with respect to Jeff's proposed change? Okay, well, make that change. All righty. I think we've made it. We've made it through 3 meetings, 7 hours together. Some of us. Shalini has been with us the whole time. I want to express my deep appreciation for her expert and very helpful report that is the source of these recommendations. So thank you again for your service, Shalini. Thanks to all of you for the committing your time to the work of ACUS. I know that time is quite valuable, so we really appreciate you spending the time on the development and the revision of the recommendations generally, and this recommendation in particular. We have Ron wants to say something.
Should there be a motion for the committee to endorse the amended recommendation?
Thank you, Ron. Does somebody want to make a motion to endorse the recommendation?
I move that the committee.
Recommendation.
Okay, and I don't know if I can second, but I will second that.
I'll second.
Second, okay, and do we take a vote on the endorsement, or do we ask if there are any objections? We do take a vote. So why don't we have a show of hands of all who support the endorsement of the recommendation, I guess is what we're voting on. All showing of hands, I guess using the hand raise feature. Okay. Okay. And then all those who, so that now lower hands, please. And all those, after all the hands are lowered. All those who object to the endorsement of the committee report. Okay. I guess we have unanimity there. I assume Andy is not objecting, but rather commenting potentially. So we will consider the committee report to be endorsed, and we'll move on to the next step in the process. And will be a subject of the plenary forthcoming in, I think, June. So thank you all again, and let me turn it over to Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Bertrand. I just want to thank you and Shalini and everyone on the committee on the call today, particularly those who participated. I think it was a great job, and I look forward to submitting it to the council in a couple of weeks, and then the plenary after that. So hopefully I'll see most of you there.
Great. Thanks so much, Andy. And again, thanks to all of you. Thanks, Ben, for your tremendous work. You've had the hardest job here. So we appreciate all the work you've put in, and thanks again for all of you for your input and your time. I will look forward to seeing you hopefully at the plenary, if not sooner. Take good care.
Thank you.